Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us, and welcome to the first live event of the Oxford University Italian Society. For the next few weeks, we will have the honor of hosting some of the most prominent figures in Italian politics, with economists, political figures, but also from culture, technology, and many others. My name is Giuliano, and I'm the president of the Oxford University Italian Society, and I will guide you through the next few events. With me tonight, we have the honor to have former Prime Minister of Italy, Professor Enrico Letta. Good evening, Professor.
Good evening.
President Letta is the Dean of the Paris School of International Affairs at Sciences Po in Paris, and also the president of Jacques Delors Institute. He was the Prime Minister of Italy from April 2013 to February 2014. And between 2001 and 2015, Mr. Letta was the member of the Italian Parliament, serving top ministerial roles. For the duration of the meeting, after a brief speech of Professor Letta, we will have 10 to 15 minutes of questions collected throughout the week. And finally, we will read the questions in the comments below. So please feel free to leave your comments. And please, Professor, the stage is yours.
Thank you so much. It's a great opportunity for me. Congratulations, Giuliano Formisano, and all the team of Oxford University Italian Society. And congratulations also for the way in which we are very timely organizing these kind of events. So it's a good opportunity to share some ideas in a week that probably will be a very important week in the relationship between Italy and the European Union. All the attention is focused on the European Council meeting for next Thursday, April 23rd. And this council will be very important for the future of the relationship between the European Union and Italy. My point is about one specific subject, the rise of Euroscepticism in the Italian society. In the last months, we had a spectacular rise, unfortunately, I say, of Euroscepticism and the idea that Italy was left alone during the crisis, exactly as the same happened in the financial crisis in 8-12 and also during the refugee crisis in 14-15. This is the feeling of a large part of the population. My point is that after some mistakes at the very beginning of the European Union institutions' response to the COVID crisis, I think in the last months, the European Union responded in a very effective way to the crisis. And this response is divided in two. There's one part of the response that is based on the European federal institutions. And my evaluation is that they did a very good job. The ECB is today working to try to stabilize the financial system and to avoid to have what happened 10 years ago with the spread at level intolerable for countries like Italy, Spain, and others. At the same time, the European Commission also had a very good track because the proposals and also some important acts, the immediate suspension of the Stability Pact on the role of competition, the big changes in the structural funds policies, this very good proposal on unemployment, on welfare, that is the first time the European Union is doing, is having a comprehensive, large and very wide approach to social issues. So there's, I think, a very good performance until now of the European institutions. I would like to add also the role of the European Parliament. That was very good because the European Parliament, under the leadership of the President, David Sassoli, decided to stay open in a moment in which it is not given for granted. It is very complicated. They worked remotely and they were very good in trying to support very advanced solutions for the recovery and for the European response to the crisis. That is a very good signal also in a moment in which, for instance, the Hungarian approach was exactly the opposite, with a challenge that is today one of the most complicated one. Democracy is today an issue that is crucial for the future of our continent, and the fact that the European Parliament did this very good job was a very important step. The complicated issue is related to the member states and to the fact that if the European federal institutions did a good job, that is not the same for member states. Member states worked in a very non-coordinated manner at the very beginning of the crisis, and still today the feeling is that also for the reopening of the different activities there's a lack of coordination that is, I think, very negative. At the same time, there's a big division within the European Council and so among member states on policies. There's a surge of an idea that is the old divide between on growth policies between two groups of countries. One group of countries around France, Italy, and Spain, thinking that growth policies are both in the hands of national governments and European institutions, and countries like the Netherlands or Denmark, and even a part of Germany, thinking that growth policies are only in the hands of member states, and the European Union is there to assure financial stability and no more than that. I think it's a mistake because the euro area is so integrated today that it's impossible to have just national policies to restore growth. And so this is why this European Council will be very important, because the way in which the response in terms of real economy will work is crucial for the future also of the effectiveness and the credibility of the European Union. So it is not true that the European Union is not working. It is not true that the European Union is not showing solidarity. In these very days, what the ECB did every day, every morning, every afternoon is exactly to show how important is the solidarity of the European institutions. The key point is the fact that this crisis is an unprecedented one, and we need unprecedented tools. So my point is that the comparison with the parallel with the previous crisis can help. It can help, first of all, to avoid mistakes in terms of wasting time, as we did in the period between 8 and 12. I mentioned the fact that what the European institutions did in the last 4 weeks is more effective and larger and deeper rather than what the European Commission and the European institutions did in the last 4 years during the crisis 8-12. In 4 years, less than in 4 weeks today. But the key point is the fact that this recession will be deeper, and it is absolutely necessary to have unprecedented tools. So we are in uncharted territories, and this is why I focus my attention, and I will end up here, on the recovery fund. That is, for me, the most important tool in the hands of the European leaders debating next Thursday. Recovery fund means, for the first time, a big real economy response from the European institutions. It is important to be creative and to build up something of very effective, able to take money from the market and able also to take money from the MFF, so the budget of the European Union. And so it is also time to improve this budget and not to limit this budget to the 1% that is the position of some countries. So this is the key point, the recovery fund. How can we work to organize a very large, powerful and effective recovery fund? And I think this is the key to understand the success or the unsuccess of next European meeting. I don't follow the a little bit crazy debate that it's taking place in the domestic Italian politics around the ESM, because it is a debate mostly on domestic issues, mostly on propaganda flags, and not on concrete reality. Just to be very clear, I think the ESM is part of the solution, but it is a small piece of the solution. It is a small piece of a very larger puzzle. The ESM, it seems that the ESM will be focused on earth emergencies, so on sanitary furnitures, and I think it can be useful for a country like Italy or for other countries. Of course, without any conditionality, that is the condition, be without conditionality, and we will see what will happen next Thursday. But the fact that everything is around this ESM, and I have to say that only in Italy this debate is taking all this, I would say, craziness, shows that it is the less influential and less important part of the big puzzle. So I think the big picture is based on the recovery fund and on other issues. The ESM can play a role on sanitary furnitures, on healthcare and so on, but it is not the most important part of this discussion. And I hope that the European debate will bring a wide, comprehensive package of solutions. And my guess is that Italy has to be united in this very complicated step, because we need to find the best solutions for this European Council, and we need to stay united. I was really shocked by the spread of the Italian delegation in the European Parliament vote last Friday, showing a fragmentation that doesn't help the country today. And I hope around the goodwill and the good messages of the President of the Republic, the Italian leaders will try or will find some unity in this very moment. I stop here. I'm ready for the discussion.
Thank you very much, Professor. That was very insightful, and I think it will lead to a very nice conversation with our audience. The first question that I would like to ask you is, you touched on the rise of Euroscepticism and the consequences of nationalist parties in the EU policymaking, and as you mentioned in your very last sentence, the fact that there was no unity in how Italy approached the vote last Friday. So my question is, how can the EU institutions prevent the rise of such parties?
I think the only way is to be effective in the response, because it is clear that today the post-virus European response is a big test to understand whether the European Union is able to tackle an unprecedented crisis or not. I'm a little bit surprised when I listen all the critical positions against Europe, the European Union, the European institutions in this very period in Italy, with a sort of continuous scapegoat positions against Europe taken by people who did a lot of mistakes during this crisis within Italy, also in their own responsibilities. in their own institutional responsibilities. It is difficult. It is a very difficult crisis. It is a difficult crisis because it is an unprecedented crisis. So it is possible to make mistakes. What is unacceptable is to use this crisis to have a propaganda approach and not to focus on facts. And I think the facts that today, just to be very clear, the recession is so huge for all European countries and mostly for Italy because of our debt, because of our structural lack of growth, and because also of the violence of the pandemic in Italy, that we need all the tools. And I think it's impossible to focus on just one tool, saying, as like people in Italy are saying, we don't want Eurobonds, we don't want ESM, we want only money of the ECB. It is absolutely unacceptable as position because the ECB can do a part of the job, and they are doing a part of the job. This part of the job is the stabilization of the financial markets, but it's not enough. There's a social problem, unemployment that will raise. There's an economy, and a real economy problem. There's a sanitary problem. This is why we need other tools like the recovery fund, like this SURE program on employment, and so on and so forth. And so I think the most important part today is how fast is the answer of the European institutions and how effective. And I think that until now, my evaluation is a positive one, as I did, but of course, the most important part will be next Thursday. And this is the only way for the European institutions to try to tackle this Eurosceptic and this Euro scapegoat that is always there. Some positions, like the one that the Dutch Prime Minister took, for instance, or other leaders saying that, it's always the same problem, grasshopper ant narrative. The Italians, Spaniards, you are the grasshopper because you don't understand how important it is to have finance in order and so on and so forth. We know it's an issue, but any link with the virus is attacking everywhere, and it's not a problem to be southern or northern. It was a chaos, it was a mess, and it was a dramatic situation in countries like Spain and Italy. So I think union means solidarity, and we wait this solidarity, and we expect this solidarity, and I'm sure that this solidarity will come.
Thank you very much, Professor. Based on your answer and the fact that we should focus on the facts and propositions, at the moment, the Italian government has created a task force of experts to handle Italy's phase 2 in the COVID crisis, charting the recovery from the pandemic. In your opinion, what should be the 3 main priorities for this task force?
First of all, I'm very happy because of the task force, and I'm very happy because of the leader of the task force. Choice of Vittorio Colau was a very, very wise choice, very good choice, a big signal in Italy and out of Italy, right person. I think the most important choices now are, first of all, on how to link the reopening of some activities and sanitary precautions. I think it's very important to create a correct balance and to avoid the big risk to have a reopening and a rise again of contagious. It would be a disaster, and so this balance is absolutely necessary. The second point is how to work with the regions to minimize the damages of this sort of fragmentation of the country that the federalism on some issues like healthcare is pushing. And maybe my third point is to work with the economic activities and the entrepreneurs, trade unions, on how to select in a wise way the different fields and the different sectors, because we have to select and we have to find the right moment to reopen this field or the other field. I think it's important to be very effective and at the same time very concrete on that. I think we have to trust this task force, and I trust Vittorio Colau very much.
Thank you very much, Professor. In a way, these solutions must be linked to what the overall European Union task force would be. So my question is, what do you think the future of the European Union will be in terms of integration? And if you think that there's going to be the possibility of returning to old state nations if the task force between countries is not coordinated?
I think what happened until now is the demonstration that the European solidarity and the European integration is working. On many issues, we are working together. On many issues, the European federal institutions are very effective. I don't think that the problem of the coordination is in the hands of the task force. The big problem is the fact that governments are thinking that they need to be the center of the stage at the European level. And I think it's a mistake. At the European level, governments, they have to ask the Commission to lead. They don't want to do it because they think the risk to lose power. It's a big mistake because in an emergency, you need a commander-in-chief. And the only commander-in-chief can be the Commission. Otherwise, you have 27 governments working in horizontal level, trying to work bilaterally on some issues, but without a general, the big picture, having in mind the big picture. Only the Commission can have the big picture in mind. And so my point is that I hope in the next days they will give more power to the European Commission, to ask the European Commission to coordinate different governments. Otherwise, the fragmentation will be a nightmare, but also for the economic system, because people working at the European level in one country, in another country, they will find a complete asymmetric situation in different countries. That doesn't help at the end of the day the relaunch and competitiveness of Europe.
Thank you very much, Professor. The next question is probably about the other big elephant in the room, which is Brexit. In your opinion, what kind of relationship there will be between the EU and the UK at the political and economic level after the coronavirus? The coronavirus. Do you think that there's going to be a change in the relationship, and how that will affect the Brexit deal that we achieved last year?
My point is that COVID-19 crisis will help to avoid a tough divorce. I think the COVID crisis is playing a role now, not only in terms of relationship between the UK and the European Union. I try to put the US also on the big picture. And my point is that the West, the old traditional West, Europe, UK, US, experienced a very negative fragmentation during the crisis. without any consultation, without cooperation, working in a separate way. And at the end of the day, it was a disaster for all the three partners, all partners. And now we see how negative is to have these three partners working in a completely uncoordinated way. So my point is that I hope this negative experience will oblige all of us, the leaders of the European Union, UK leaders and US leaders, to think that a sort of reshape of the transatlantic community is a priority. It is a priority for all of us, but it is also a priority for tomorrow's world. Tomorrow's world needs leadership, and the Western world was completely overwhelmed by what happened. We accuse, or someone accuses, Europe for mismanagement or bad leadership, but I think the UK and the US were even worse than the European Union and the other European countries in terms of management, political management of the crisis, or mismanagement, mistakes, and so on. So I think we have to take all lessons from the crisis, and this reshape of the transatlantic community after the crisis is a priority, of course. To transform this priority in reality, the elections in the US in November will play a decisive role, because we can hope to have this reshape with the new president of the US. It would be very complicated to think to reshape anything with this same president.
Thank you very much, Mr. Professor. These were my questions, and now I think it's time for the audience to leave comments if they want, and I will be able to, and I will be very happy to read the questions. Okay. The first one I have received was from Mattia Sisti, a PhD student here at Oxford, who's asking about international politics. So his question is very related to what you were discussing earlier with the United States. He's asking, on the one side, we have seen the rise of a very protectionist and isolationist agenda in America, driven by President Trump. On the other side, there is a more assertive China, which expands its influence mostly by economic means under the leadership of Xi Jinping. In the middle, there is our European Union. So what is the role that the European Union can play between these two superpowers? Thank you.
That's a very good question. And my point is that this question is the reason why we have to improve the European integration, and we have to work for a united European Union. Exactly because in the world of tomorrow, the bipolarization and sort of decoupling US-China will create a new scenario where the single European countries alone would be obliged at the end of the day to choose to be a sort of American colony or a sort of Chinese colony. The only way to avoid this destiny is to stay together as Europeans. It's the only way, because we have to create a third bloc, and this third bloc is Europe, and we need to reinforce links among the different countries. There are many issues. You mentioned trade. I mentioned two issues that I think are today the most relevant, maybe, in this scenario. One is climate change, and the other one is the technological humanism. How to be, as Europeans, leaders in the world on these two subjects, knowing that in the US and in China, the relevance on these two subjects is different from what we experience in in Europe. And so my guess is that we the Europeans, we can take the leadership, developing these two subjects as main priorities. And it is the only way to avoid to be in a choice for the future. And we know very well that Chinese diplomacy or hegemonia is working very hard, and it used to work during the crisis in trying to attract. I know because in Italy we experienced that. So the flags, Chinese flags with sanitary masks and help. We were very grateful, of course. But it is clear that we can't consider it as an alternative to the European integration. European integration is our path. And the good relationship with China and, of course, the alliance, the strategic alliance with the US has to continue. But the only way is to reinforce this European platform.
Thank you very much, Professor. I think one of the points you touched, the climate change, is very linked to what Giovanni Rettieri, a PPE student here at Oxford, is asking. His question is, the concern of many young European people, like myself and others from the audience, is the climate crisis. What do you think the future of the European Green Deal will be?
I say to Giovanni and to all of you that the Green Deal can be the victim of COVID crisis. We have to be aware of that. I don't trust those saying that Green Deal is automatically stronger with this crisis. It is not true. There's unfortunately a possibility of the leaders and all the energies, the resources of the European Union to be completely focused now on the economic crisis, the recession, and to forget the priority of the Green Deal. It would be an enormous mistake. So it is important now to stay focused and to think that what we decided last year in terms of creation of this Green New Deal and having this point as priority for the future, we have to continue and we have to transform our economy. We have to take advantage of the change that the COVID-19 will bring to our situation, pushing for a more pro-Green Deal approach. So it's time to act. It's time to act for leaders, but it's also time to act for people, for students, for people from NGOs, from people trying to work on the different aspects. I would like just to share with you what we did in my university in Sciences Po at the end of January, before the lockdown. We had a big seminar on this issue, and the main topic was how to combine prosperity and climate change and fight against climate change. Because I think that we need to avoid that climate change is associated to de-investment, lack of prosperity, lack of growth. It is not true. We have to transform our economy, and we have to transform it in a pro-green and prosperous economy. And that is, I think, a big challenge, and the post-COVID-19 crisis will boost this challenge and maybe can help this challenge.
Thank you very much, Professor. The next question is also about international politics, and it comes from Piero Alberti, who's a medical student here at Oxford. The question is, the Hungarian government has exploited the COVID-19 crisis as an excuse to issue an indefinite suspension of parliament and rule by decree, while the Polish government has decided to press ahead with presidential elections in May, despite an ongoing lockdown. Do you think that the Council of the EU should trigger Article 7, proceeding to suspend Hungary and Poland voting rights?
I think we have to be very tough on that, and the reaction needs to be a strong reaction. The big problem is the lack of tools, because this famous Article 7 needs the unanimity at the end of the track. And if you mention that countries are two, it is unfortunately a big obstacle for the unanimity, because Poland will always support Hungary and Hungary will always support Poland. So we have there a sort of bug in our procedure. And so I think we need to invent something more powerful. And my point is that now we are entering the discussion, the debate on the future of MFF, the budget of European Union. So I think we have to introduce in this budget some conditionality rules obliging countries to behave. Otherwise, on rule of law, wounds or ruptures, the European Commission should be able to take the lead on how to manage some funds for these countries. I know it's a sort of atomic bomb, but it is the only way to convince them to behave and to be serious. Orban played a very bad game on this crisis, because the idea to suspend democracy and to suspend it without a deadline, that is the crucial point, because all different countries are having emergency rules in this very period, but they are all in a timing system with deadlines. And that is the only way to work. The Council of Europe, the international organization based in Strasbourg and responsible for human rights and rule of law, focused this point on what Hungary did, the lack of deadline. And the lack of deadline is a very, very bad choice. So I think we need to be very tough. I don't think that the Article 7 can be effective until the end because of this bug, as I mentioned, the unanimity rule. Unanimity of the 26, of course, and if there are two, as I told at the beginning, it's a big problem. So we need to introduce something more strong, and this conditionality for structural funds or for agricultural funds, I think can be the only way to be very influential.
Thank you very much, Professor. The next question, the next three questions will be about domestic politics. The first one comes from Anna Clemente, a master student here at Oxford. She's asking, some commentators have proposed the staggered reopening of different geographic regions in Italy based on the sistemi locali di lavoro, borders that subdivide the country whilst not separating workers' residences from their workplace. The hope is that this would allow for targeted efforts that don't impede economic activity elsewhere. How do you weigh the alternatives of nationwide, geographically staggered, or age group-based removal or restrictions? Thank you.
I don't have a complete answer to this question, because I am not familiar with this system. I know that it's complicated to organize the reopening and to avoid that this reopening of the work activities, to avoid this reopening bringing too many movement and bringing the risk of a new rise of contagions. So I think they have to be very wise in this discussion. My guess is that we need to avoid to have an homogeneous national decision, because I think the experience of the last 2 months is that there are two Italies. One Italy is Lombardy, and the other Italy is the rest of the country. And I think it would be correct to have two tracks, one for Lombardy and one for the rest of the country. There are regions, Sicily or Campania or Lazio, where really coronavirus doesn't exist. And you have Lombardy. So you can't use exactly the same rules, same behaviors with different situations like that. So I hope they will be able to approach in a different way and in a very flexible and selective way.
Thank you very much, Professor. Two more questions on domestic politics. The first one comes from Edoardo Lanfranchi, a master's student here at Oxford, who's asking, if you could go back and do one thing differently during your time in office, what would that thing be and why?
Many things, not only one, but maybe one. I think we were not effective and not as fast as we needed on the institutional reforms, for instance. I always very sad because we missed an opportunity, and what we are experiencing now, for instance, with this fragmentation of the regions, with this very bad governance we have in the country, is that it is not true that institutions don't matter. Institutions matter. They are important, and a bad governance of a country will bring bad solutions. So maybe if I have to choose one, is this one.
Thank you very much. The final question comes from our committee. We normally ask this question always at the end of every interview. This one is, did you expect that call from President Napolitano when he asked you to become the Prime Minister of Italy and form a government? And if you would like to share with us some fun facts about it. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, it's a long time ago. No, I didn't expect. I think it was something unexpected, and of course, for me, it was also a sudden change in my personal life, in my family life, in my. There's a completely changed situation when you become prime minister. Your private life, your personal life is completely cancelled. So I think my first idea was how to preserve normality in my life or my family, and that was maybe the first thought. And at the end of the day, I think it's still a problem in political life, because there's a sort of mess when you are in responsibilities around you, a sort of media full crazy coverage that makes you crazy in the way in which you have to work. And this is why I'm very much supportive and in solidarity with those in this period in charge for decisions, because I know very well how difficult for them today is to take decisions, is to have this kind of life. It's not a life of privileges, it's a life full of responsibilities and very difficult. And this is why, at the end of the day, I think that today, during this crisis, we have to support those who are in charge in Italy. And I mean the Prime Minister, I mean commissioners in the different fields, but I mean also President of the regions, from the left, from the right. I think it's time to support all of them and to help them to avoid making mistakes and trying to work for the general interest of the country. Then political games or political plays can be postponed after the crisis. Now it's time altogether to act in a united way, and my own experience tells me that it is very important to help them in this very period.
Thank you very much, Professor. I saw that you avoided our question about fun facts about your premiership. Is there something that you would like to share with us? You don't have to.
I'll do it in a private way. If you invite me in Oxford, I will be more than happy to be with you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Professor Letta, for your interesting and thoughtful insights and for answering our questions. I hope that soon we will be able to host you in Oxford and finally have an exchange about your fun facts.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you very much.
Congratulations. Bye-bye.
Bye.